The deep space monitoring station of the Zephyrian Collective hummed with quiet efficiency. Rows of alien technicians sat before glowing screens, their scaled hands dancing across control panels as they watched the endless void for signs of new life. For 300 years, the Collective had expanded across the galaxy, finding new species to study, catalog, and ultimately control. Senior Monitor Vextal adjusted his headset as a weak signal crackled through the static. His large, compound eyes focused on the readout. The transmission was coming from the outer rim, far from any known civilization. He leaned forward, his interest growing. Admiral Kethvar to the monitoring bay. He spoke into his communicator. "We have something." Minutes later, Admiral Kethvar swept into the room. The Collective's military leader was an imposing figure, even by their standards. His dark blue scales gleamed under the artificial light, and his 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he examined the data. "What do we have, Monitor?" "A distress signal, sir. Weak and breaking up, but definitely artificial. The source appears to be a small vessel, possibly a research ship." Vextal's fingers worked quickly, cleaning up the audio. "Listen to this." The speakers crackled to life. Through the static, they could hear voices speaking in an unknown language. The words were harsh and quick, unlike the flowing tones of most civilized species they had encountered. "Can you make out what they're saying?" Kethavar asked. "Our translation computers are working on it, sir. So far, we've identified several repeated words. Earth seems to be a place name, possibly their home world, and they keep saying something that translates roughly to children or young ones." Kethvar's eyes brightened with interest. The Collective's greatest scientific achievements came from studying different species, especially in their younger stages of development. Young specimens adapted better to their research programs and provided more useful data. "How far away is this signal coming from?" "Approximately 6 standard hours at maximum speed, sir. The vessel appears to be drifting, possibly damaged." "Ship. Size and capabilities?" Vextal checked his screens again. "Small, sir. Maybe 60 meters long. Basic metal construction, primitive energy signature. Their technology seems to be at least 200 years behind ours." Admiral Kethvar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was exactly what the Collective needed. A new species, apparently helpless and carrying young specimens. The research division would be very pleased. "Prepare my flagship for immediate departure. Standard capture protocols. I want that ship and everything on it brought back intact." "Yes, sir." "Should we alert the research teams?" "Absolutely. Tell them we may have a new species for study, possibly with young specimens aboard." Kethvar turned to leave, then paused. "And Vextal? Good work. This could be very valuable." As the Admiral left, Vextal continued listening to the transmission. The voices seemed urgent, almost desperate. He heard the word Earth again, followed by what sounded like numbers and coordinates. The translation computer was still working, but it seemed like the beings were calling for help. Meanwhile, aboard the massive Collective dreadnought Sovereign's Will, preparations began immediately. The ship was enormous, stretching over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull bristled with energy weapons and defensive shields. It had conquered dozens of worlds and captured hundreds of different species for the Collective's research programs. Captain Zoreth, Kethvar's second, in command, supervised the loading of capture equipment. Stasis pods for live specimens, molecular restraints, and portable laboratory units were all brought aboard. The Collective had perfected the art of taking prisoners for study. "How many beings do we expect to find?" asked Dr. Sylvan, the chief. "Researcher." "Unknown," Zoreth replied. "The transmission mentioned young ones, so we should prepare for at least a few specimens. Their technology appears primitive, so they shouldn't pose any threat." Dr. Sylvan rubbed his hands together excitedly. "Excellent. New species are always fascinating, especially when we can study their development patterns from a young age." As the Sovereign's Will entered hyperspace, racing toward the distress signal, none of the Collective crew suspected what they were really heading toward. In their experience, Primitive species meant easy captures. Small ships meant weak defenses. Distress calls meant helpless victims. They had never encountered humans before. Back at the monitoring station, Vextal managed to clean up more of the transmission. The translation computer was making progress, and what it revealed made him frown in confusion. The beings weren't just calling for help, they were using military terminology, tactical language that seemed far too advanced for such a primitive species. Words like extraction, hostile contact, and defensive positions came through clearly. But most puzzling was a phrase that kept repeating, "Ghost Division." The computer couldn't make sense of it. What kind of research vessel would have something called a Ghost Division aboard? Vextal considered contacting the Admiral, but the Sovereign's will was already in hyperspace. Besides, it was probably just a translation error. Primitive species often had strange names for simple things. 6 hours later, the collective dreadnought dropped out of hyperspace near the source of the distress signal. The human vessel appeared on their screens immediately, and it looked exactly as primitive as they had expected. The ship was small and angular, built from simple metal alloys. It had basic thruster ports and what looked like primitive weapon systems. No energy shields were visible, and the power signature was remarkably weak. "Just as we thought," Captain Zorath reported to Admiral Kethvar. "A helpless research vessel. This will be simple." Admiral Kethvar studied the human ship through the view screen. It looked damaged, with scorch marks along its hull and several systems showing as offline. Perfect for their purposes. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. The response came immediately, but it wasn't what they expected. Instead of pleading for help or trying to surrender, the human voice was calm and professional. "Unknown vessel, this is Sergeant Chen of the Terran Defense Corps. State your intentions." Admiral Kethvar was intrigued. The being sounded young, possibly one of the children they had heard about. And what was a Terran Defense Corps? It sounded military, but that made no sense for such a primitive species. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective," he replied. "We received your distress call and have come to assist you." There was a pause, then the human responded. "Negative. We did not send a distress call. Our communications have been compromised. We request you maintain distance while we complete repairs." This was unexpected. The collective had clearly intercepted a distress signal. Why would they deny sending it? "Our sensors indicate your vessel is severely damaged," Kethvar said. "We insist on providing assistance." Another pause, longer this time. When the human spoke again, there was something different in the tone, something harder. "Admiral, I'm going to say this once more. Maintain your distance. We are conducting classified operations and do not require assistance." Classified operations? From a primitive research vessel? Admiral Kethvar's patience was running out. He had not come this far to be turned away by a damaged ship with children aboard. "I'm afraid I must insist," he said. "Prepare to be boarded." The response was immediate and shocking. "If you attempt to board this vessel, you will be fired upon. This is your only warning." Admiral Kethvar looked at his crew in amazement. A tiny, damaged ship was threatening his massive dreadnought? It was almost funny. "Begin tractor beam capture," he ordered, "and prepare boarding parties. These beings clearly don't understand their situation." As the Sovereign's will moved toward the human vessel, Admiral Kethvar was already planning how he would display these new specimens. The young one who had spoken to him sounded particularly interesting. He had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake in the collective's 300-year history. Aboard the human ship, Sergeant Maya Chen turned away from the communication console. Her team was already in position, weapons ready, faces calm. At 22, she was the oldest person on the ship. "Well, people," she said quietly, "looks like we're going to have company. First contact gone wrong." The tractor beam from the Sovereign's will locked onto the human vessel with ease. Admiral Kethvar watched with satisfaction as the small ship was pulled steadily toward his dreadnought's main docking bay. The primitive craft had no chance of escaping. "Boarding parties ready, sir," Captain Zorith reported. "2 full squads, armed with stun weapons and capture gear." "Excellent. Remember, we want live specimens, especially the young ones." Kethvar studied the enemy ship on his screen. "How many life signs are you reading?" 12, sir. All showing elevated stress responses, which is normal for primitive species facing superior technology." Admiral Kethvar nodded. 12 specimens would be perfect for the research division. Dr. Sylvan was already preparing the laboratory facilities. The collective boarding parties were among the finest in the galaxy. Each soldier wore powered armor that could stop most weapons and boost their strength to incredible levels. Their plasma rifles could cut through steel, and their energy shields made them nearly invincible. They had captured hundreds of ships from dozens of species. Squad leader Thekvan checked his equipment one final time as the human ship settled into the docking bay. His armor's sensors showed him everything he needed to know about the target. Vessel. Thin metal walls, basic atmosphere, primitive electrical systems. This would be over in minutes. "Remember," he told his soldiers, "these beings may look like children, but they could be adults of their species. Use stun settings only. The research teams want them alive and undamaged." The boarding tube extended from the Sovereign's will and attached to the human ship's airlock. Thekvan's sensors showed that the atmosphere inside was breathable for collective forces. Everything was proceeding normally. "Cutting through the airlock now," reported the tech specialist. "Metal is surprisingly thick for such a primitive design, but nothing our tools can't handle." The airlock door fell inward with a heavy clang. Immediately, Thekvan's squad moved forward in perfect formation, plasma rifles ready. They entered. A narrow corridor lined with metal panels and basic lighting. Everything looked exactly as primitive as they had expected, but something felt wrong. The corridor was too quiet. Most species they captured were either screaming in terror or trying to surrender by now. These beings were silent. "Life signs?" Thekvan asked. "Still reading 12 contacts, sir. They appear to be spread throughout the ship. Some are in what looks like the bridge area, others in various compartments." Thekvan motioned his squad forward. The corridor branched in 2 directions. Standard procedure was to split up and capture all specimens as quickly as possible. Team 1, take the left passage. Team 2, follow me to the bridge. Remember, we want them alive. That's when everything went wrong. The metal panels in the walls suddenly fell away, revealing hidden alcoves. From these positions, the humans opened fire with weapons that should not have existed on such a primitive ship. But these weren't energy weapons or plasma rifles. They were kinetic weapons, firing solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The collective, soldiers had never encountered anything like them. Thekvan's energy shields, designed to stop plasma bolts and energy beams, were useless against the solid bullets. The projectiles punched right through his defenses and slammed into his armor with devastating force. The human weapons made sharp, cracking sounds that echoed through the metal corridors. Bang, 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 over and over, faster than any energy weapon could fire. Thekvan watched in shock as 3 of his soldiers fell in the first few seconds. "Contact! Contact!" he shouted into his communicator. "They're using unknown weapon types. Shields are ineffective." From her position behind an overturned table, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen observed the alien soldiers with professional interest. Their armor was impressive, and their energy shields had surprised her at first. But the Terran Defense Corps had trained for encounters with unknown technologies. "Thompson Rodriguez, keep them pinned down in the main corridor," she spoke quietly into a headset. "Jackson Santos, move to flanking positions. Kim, Park, prepare for the 2nd squad." The Ghost Division was Earth's most elite special forces unit. Every member had been selected for their ability to think quickly and adapt to any situation. They were also the youngest special forces unit in human history, with an average age of barely 21. The collective had expected to capture helpless children. Instead, they had walked into a carefully prepared kill zone. Private Jackson, 19 years old and already a veteran of 4 campaigns, slid through the ship's maintenance shafts with practiced ease. The aliens had made a classic mistake by splitting their forces. Now he was behind their second team. "Ghost 2 in position," he reported. "Light them up," Chen replied. Jackson opened fire from behind, while Santos hit them from the side. The collective soldiers found themselves caught in a crossfire from multiple directions, using weapons their armor couldn't stop. Squad leader Thekvan realized his mission was failing catastrophically. Half his soldiers were down, and the other half were pinned down by enemies they couldn't even see clearly. The humans moved like shadows, appearing just long enough to fire, then disappearing again. "Sovereign's will, this is boarding party 1. He gasped into his communicator. "We need immediate support. The primitives are not primitive." Admiral Kethvar received the transmission with disbelief. "What do you mean they're not primitive? They're using basic metal weapons." "Sir, their weapons are penetrating our shields and armor. They're using tactics we've never encountered. We need heavy assault teams immediately." Before Kethvar could respond, another voice cut through the communications. It was the same young human who had spoken to him earlier. "Admiral, this is Sergeant Chen. Your soldiers attacked a vessel under the protection of the Terran Defense Corps. I'm giving you one chance to call them back before this gets worse." "Impossible," Kethvar snarled. "You're primitives with metal. Weapons!" "Sir," Chen's voice was calm, almost polite. "Your soldiers are currently experiencing what we call a learning opportunity. Your energy shields don't stop kinetic energy. Your armor is designed for plasma weapons, not solid projectiles traveling at 3,000 feet per second. And your tactics assume technological superiority can replace tactical skill." As if to prove her point, another collective soldier fell to human fire. "Your boarding parties are trapped in what we call a fatal funnel," Chen continued. "Every entrance to this ship is covered by overlapping fields of fire. Your soldiers can't advance, and they can't retreat. Would you like to discuss surrender terms?" Admiral Kethvar was speechless. In 300 years of collective expansion, no primitive species had ever spoken to them like this. No one had ever turned their own superior technology against them. "This is impossible," he repeated. "Sir, with respect, you're thinking like someone who's never fought a real war," Chen replied. "You're used to overwhelming primitive species with superior technology, but we're not primitive. We're just practical." To prove her point, Chen activated a device that squad leader Thekvan recognized too late. The humans had planted charges throughout their own ship, not to destroy it, but to reconfigure it. Bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off escape routes. Emergency lighting kicked in, giving the humans perfect night vision while leaving the collective soldiers partially blinded. Atmosphere began venting from certain sections, forcing the aliens into exactly the positions the humans wanted. In less than 5 minutes, the humans had turned their own damaged ship into a perfect trap. "How are they doing this?" Dr. Sylvan asked from the safety of the Sovereign's will. "Our sensors show their technology is centuries behind ours." "Their technology might be primitive," Admiral Kethvar admitted reluctantly. "But their tactics are not." The truth was becoming clear. The collective had never encountered a species like humans before. Most civilizations they conquered were peaceful researchers or traders. They had advanced technology but no real military experience. Humans apparently were different. "Boarding party 2, fall back to the airlock," Kethvar ordered. "We'll try a different approach." But it was too late. As the surviving collective soldiers tried to retreat, they discovered that the humans had quietly sealed the airlock behind them. They were trapped aboard the human ship with enemies who knew every corridor and hiding place. "Admiral," Sergeant Chen's voice came through the communicators again. "Your soldiers are now prisoners of war. I'm prepared to discuss their return." But first, we need to talk about what happens next. What do you mean, what happens next? Well, sir, you've just attacked a vessel belonging to the Terran Defense Corps. That's going to require a response. Admiral, Kethavar felt a chill run down his spine. Are you threatening us? No, sir. I'm informing you. You see, before your boarding parties attacked us, we managed to send out a message. A very simple message. What kind of message? Chen's voice was still calm, but now there was something else in it. Something that made Admiral Kethavar's scales prickle with unease. We told Earth that someone was attacking their children, she said quietly. Now all we have to do is wait. The swarm awakens. Admiral Kethavar stared at the view screen showing the human vessel, trying to understand what had just happened. His elite boarding parties had been defeated by a handful of beings using primitive weapons. It was impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of him. Sir, Captain Zoreth said carefully, what are your orders? Kethavar's pride was wounded, but he was not foolish. These humans had proven they were more dangerous than expected. The logical response was overwhelming force. Contact Fleet Command. Request immediate reinforcement. 3 heavy dreadnoughts minimum. Sir, for one small vessel. Captain, that small vessel just destroyed 2 of our best boarding parties using metal projectiles and tactical thinking. I want enough firepower to turn it into dust particles. Dr. Sylvan approached nervously. Admiral, what about the specimens? If we destroy the ship? The specimens just proved they're too dangerous to capture alive, Kethavar snapped. We'll study their remains. As the communications went out to Fleet Command, Admiral Kethavar settled in to wait. Fleet reinforcement would take 6 hours to arrive. He could wait that long. The human ship wasn't going anywhere. What he didn't know was that the humans had been very busy during their conversation. Aboard the Ghost Division vessel, Private Kim worked quickly at a computer terminal. At 19, she was the unit's technical specialist, trained in electronic warfare and communication systems. Package is ready, Sergeant, she reported to Maya Chen. Chen looked at the device Kim had assembled from parts of the alien equipment their prisoners had been carrying. It was a tracking beacon, modified to work with collective technology. Good work. Thompson, Santos, you know what to do. The 2 soldiers moved to where the surviving collective troops were being held. The aliens had been stripped of their weapons and armor, but they were still alive. Chen had made sure of that. We're going to let you go, Thompson told the shocked aliens. Your admiral wants his people back, and we want you off our ship. Squad leader Thekvan, wounded but alive, stared at the humans in confusion. You're releasing us? That's right. Just one condition. Santos held up Kim's modified device. You're going to carry this back to your ship. Think of it as a gift. The collective soldiers had no choice but to accept. They were escorted back to the airlock, the tracking device hidden among their equipment. As they crossed back to the Sovereign's will, none of them noticed the small addition to their gear. Admiral Kethavar was relieved to have his people back, but his questions about their defeat received uncomfortable answers. The humans had not tortured them or even been particularly cruel. They had simply been impossibly efficient at warfare. They think like soldiers, Thekvan reported, not like researchers or traders. Every move they made was calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum risk. They've been trained for this. Trained by whom? Kethavar demanded. They're primitives from an unknown world. Sir, with respect, they're not primitives. Their weapons are primitive, but their tactics are advanced. They've clearly fought wars before. Many wars. This information disturbed Admiral Kethavar greatly. The collective had conquered dozens of species, but most had been peaceful civilizations with little military experience. The idea of a species that specialized in warfare was troubling. He was still considering this when the tracking device activated. Kim's modification was simple but effective. Using collective technology, it sent out a broad-spectrum message across all communication frequencies. The message was short, transmitted in clear human language, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Mayday, Mayday. Ghost Division under attack by unknown alien force. Children in immediate danger. Request immediate assistance. Send everything. The message broadcast continuously, growing stronger as the Sovereign's will's own communication array boosted its signal. Within minutes, it had reached the edge of human space. Admiral Kethvar only realized what had happened when his communication officer reported unusual activity on all frequencies. Sir, we're detecting a massive increase in communication traffic from the direction of what must be human space. Multiple sources, all using the same unknown language. What are they saying? Translation computers are working, sir, but the message traffic appears to be military in nature. Coordinates, fleet movements, tactical discussions. A cold feeling settled in Admiral Kethvar's stomach. How much message traffic? Sir, our computers are having trouble keeping up. There appear to be hundreds of different sources, possibly thousands. That was when the first human ships arrived. They didn't come through hyperspace like civilized species. They came through something else, something that tore holes in reality itself and allowed massive ships to appear without warning. The first vessel to emerge was huge, nearly as large as a collective dreadnought. But where collective ships were, smooth and elegant, this human ship was angular and brutal, covered in weapon systems and armor plating. Unknown alien vessel, came a transmission in perfect collective language. This is Captain Rachel Torres of the Terran Defense Force ship Retribution. You have attacked one of our vessels. Explain yourselves immediately. Admiral Kethvar was stunned. Not only had more humans arrived, but they had somehow learned his language and were communicating clearly. How was that possible? I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective, he replied. We were investigating a distress signal. Admiral, Captain Torres interrupted, our people did not send a distress signal. Our records show you attacked a vessel conducting classified operations. That constitutes an act of war. Before Kethvar could respond, more tiers appeared in space. More human ships emerged, each one as large and heavily armed as the first. Within minutes, 12 human vessels surrounded the Sovereign's will. This is impossible, Dr. Sylvan whispered. How did they arrive so quickly? How did they even know where to find us? Captain Zoreth was studying the sensor readings with growing alarm. Sir, these ships are not primitive. Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to ours, just different. And their weapons? What about their weapons? Sir, they're all pointed at us. Admiral Kethvar opened communications with the human fleet. Captain Torres, surely we can discuss this situation like civilized beings. This was clearly a misunderstanding. The human captain's response was immediate and chilling. Admiral, you picked the wrong species kids to mess with. More human ships were arriving every minute. The tiers in space seemed to be getting larger, allowing bigger vessels to come through. Kethvar watched in growing horror as his sensors detected battleships, carriers, and ship types he couldn't even identify. Sir, his communication officer reported, Fleet Command is asking about our status. The reinforcements are still 4 hours away. Admiral Kethvar looked at the growing human fleet surrounding his ship. There were now over 30 vessels, with more arriving constantly. Some of them were larger than anything in the collective fleet. Cancel the reinforcement request, he said quietly. Sir, cancel it. Tell Fleet Command we have the situation under control. Captain Zoreth stared at him. Sir, we don't have the situation under control. I know that. But if we call for help, Fleet Command will send ships. And if they send ships, the humans will destroy them. Kethvar studied the tactical display. Look at this fleet, Captain. They didn't just happen to have these ships nearby. They built this response specifically for us. The truth was becoming clear. The small human vessel had been bait. The distress signal had been intended to lure the collective into making exactly the mistake they had made. Sir, the communication officer said urgently, we're receiving a transmission from the original human vessel. Put it through. Sergeant. Chen's voice came through clearly. Admiral Kethvar, this is your last chance for a peaceful resolution. You have 1 minute to surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. And if I refuse? Then you'll discover why humans don't have many friends in the galaxy, sir. We tend to solve problems permanently. Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him, waiting for orders. Outside, the human fleet continued to grow. Some of the new arrivals were so large they barely fit on his sensors. "Sergeant Chen," he said finally, "what are your terms?" "Complete surrender of your vessel and crew. You'll be questioned about collective military capabilities and territories. Any resistance will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. And, if we comply, you'll be treated according to the laws of war. Your crew will not be harmed if they cooperate." Admiral Kethvar closed his eyes. In 300 years, the collective had never surrendered to anyone. They had always been the ones making demands, taking prisoners, conducting research on helpless species, but they had never encountered humans before. "All stations, stand down," he ordered. "Prepare for boarding." Captain Torres's voice came through the communicators one final time. "Smart choice, Admiral. But you should know something. This isn't even our main fleet. These are just the ships that happen to be close enough to respond quickly." Admiral Kethvar felt his scales turn cold. "What do you mean?" "The real fleet is still coming, sir, and they're going to want to have a very long conversation with your superiors about what happens to species that threaten Earth's children. Escalation protocol." The collective high command chamber buzzed with nervous energy as reports flooded in from across their territory. Supreme Admiral Veltar read the communications with growing disbelief, his 4 hands trembling slightly as he processed the information. "Repeat that last transmission," he ordered. Communication Officer Rindal cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, Admiral Kethvar reports that his flagship has been captured by an unknown species calling themselves humans. The entire crew is being held prisoner. The unknown species is demanding immediate negotiations with our high command." 1. Ship? Supreme Admiral Veltar's voice rose in disbelief. "Admiral Kethvar's flagship was defeated by one ship?" "No, sir. By one small ship that called for help. According to our last communication, over 200 human vessels have gathered at the incident site. And, sir, they're heading toward our space." Supreme Admiral Veltar stood slowly from his command throne. In his 400 years of life, he had overseen the conquest of 17 species and the annexation of 43 star systems. The collective was the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. The idea that they were being threatened by a previously unknown species was absurd. "What do we know about these humans?" he demanded. Science Director Pilsek consulted his data tablet. "Very little, sir. They appear to be a carbon-based species from a world they call Earth. Their technology is roughly equivalent to ours, but their ship designs are unusual. They seem to prefer heavy armor and kinetic weapons over energy shields and plasma systems." "Kinetic weapons?" Veltar scoffed. "Primitive throwing rocks at starships?" "Sir, according to Admiral Kethvar's reports, their kinetic weapons proved highly effective against our energy shields. Our boarding parties were defeated with heavy casualties." This gave Veltar pause. Collective military technology was the finest in the galaxy. If primitive weapons had proven effective against it, these humans must have some tactical advantage he didn't understand. "What about their fleet movements? Where are they going?" "Sir, that's what concerns us most. Our deep space sensors are tracking a massive human fleet moving directly toward our home systems. Current estimates suggest over 1,000 vessels, of various sizes." The chamber fell silent. 1,000 ships was larger than the entire collective home fleet. "That's impossible," Veltar said finally. "No species maintains a fleet that large. The resource requirements alone." "Sir," interrupted Intelligence Director Nexavar, "we've been analyzing the human communications we've intercepted. Our computers..." have learned enough of their language to provide basic translations. And, sir, these are not their main military forces. According to their transmissions, these are what they call rapid response fleets and planetary defense units. They seem to maintain much larger forces that haven't been deployed yet. Supreme Admiral Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. The collective had built their empire by finding species weaker than themselves and absorbing them. The idea of encountering a species that might be stronger was terrifying. What are they? Demanding complete withdrawal from the incident site, release of all prisoners taken from their vessel, and immediate negotiations regarding what they call war crimes committed against non-combatant personnel. War crimes? We were conducting standard capture operations for research purposes. Intelligence Director Nexvar consulted his notes again. Sir, this seems to be a translation error. The humans appear to believe that Admiral Kethvar attacked children. Children? The specimens were research subjects. Yes, sir, but the humans don't seem to make that distinction. According to our translations, they consider any attack on their young to be grounds for what they call total war. Veltar was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. Most civilized species understood that research was necessary for scientific advancement. Apparently, humans did not. Sir, Communication Officer Rindal interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting immediate communication with our highest military authority. Put it through. The view screen activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be military uniform. She was older than the young ones Admiral Kethvar had, reported, with gray hair and hard eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an undertone of barely controlled fury. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. I am authorized to speak for Earth's government and military. You have attacked one of our vessels and taken prisoners from our personnel. This constitutes an act of war. Supreme Admiral Veltar drew himself up to his full height. I am Supreme Admiral Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective. There has been a misunderstanding. Our forces were responding to a distress call. Admiral, Chen interrupted. We have reviewed all communications between your forces and ours. Admiral Kethvar was informed that no distress call had been sent. He chose to attack anyway. The vessel contained research specimens. The vessel contained members of my daughter's unit. Admiral Chen's voice turned deadly quiet. Admiral, you attacked children under the protection of Earth's military. That changes everything. Veltar felt confusion mixing with his growing fear. Your daughter? Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, Ghost Division. The young woman your admiral tried to capture for his research programs. Admiral Chen leaned forward on her screen. Admiral, you need to understand something about humans. We take the safety of our children very seriously. Surely we can negotiate some arrangement. Negotiation time is over, Chen said flatly. Here are your options. Option 1, immediate and complete surrender of all collective military forces, followed by war crimes, trials, and reparations. Option 2, total war. Supreme Admiral Veltar had never heard such terms from a conquered species. They were supposed to be the ones making demands, not receiving ultimatums. You cannot seriously expect the collective to surrender to an unknown species, he said. Admiral, you're thinking like someone who's never fought a real war, Chen replied. You're used to bullying peaceful research species, but humans aren't peaceful, and we're not researchers. We're what other species become when they're forced to fight for survival for millions of years. Our fleet contains over 200 ships of the line. Our advanced fleet contains over 1,000 ships, Admiral. Our main battle fleet contains over 5,000, and that's just what we can deploy quickly. Chen's expression never changed. But numbers aren't really the issue here. What do you mean? You attacked our children, Admiral. When humans are protecting their young, we don't count the cost. We don't consider acceptable losses. We don't negotiate or compromise. Admiral Chen's voice grew colder. "We simply remove the threat permanently." On his tactical displays, Supreme Admiral Veltar could see the human fleet approaching collective space. It was enormous, far larger than anything they could deploy to stop it. "Sir," Science Director Pilsek whispered, "our analysis suggests their technological capabilities are roughly equal to ours, but their ship construction suggests they've been building for war for a very long time." "What do you mean?" "Sir, their vessels are designed for sustained combat operations. Heavy armor, redundant systems, extensive point defense networks. These are not ships built for exploration or research. They're ships built to fight and win wars." Supreme Admiral Veltar was beginning to understand the terrible mistake Admiral Kethvar had made. The collective had encountered a military species, not a research species, and they had attacked that species' children. "Admiral Chen," he said carefully, "what would it take to resolve this peacefully?" "Nothing," she replied immediately. "Admiral, you crossed a line that humans don't allow anyone to cross. The only question now is how much of your civilization survives the consequences. Surely you don't mean to destroy an entire civilization over a misunderstanding." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but absolutely final. "Admiral, 3 hours ago your forces tried to capture my daughter for use in research experiments. They tried to take her apart to see how she works." Chen's eyes were like ice. "So yes, Admiral, I absolutely mean to destroy your entire civilization, if that's what it takes to make sure this never happens again." The transmission ended, leaving the collective high command in stunned silence. "Sir," Communication Officer Rindal said quietly, "what are your orders?" Supreme Admiral Veltar looked around the chamber at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for the solution he had always provided before. But this time was different. This time, they had awakened something that was bigger, stronger, and angrier than they were. "Contact all fleet commanders," he said finally. "Begin immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from border systems. Prepare our main fleet for defensive operations." "Sir, are we surrendering?" "No," Veltar said quietly. "We're preparing for a war we can't win, because the alternative is admitting that the collective's 300-year expansion is over." But in his heart, he knew the truth. The moment Admiral Kethavar had attacked those human children, the collective's days as a galactic power had ended. Now all that remained was finding out how many of them would survive humanity's response. Children of Earth. The collective home system of Zephyr Prime had never seen so many ships in one place. Supreme Admiral Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching as his entire fleet assembled for what everyone knew would be their final battle. 247 ships of the line, the entire military might of the Zephyrian Collective, gathered from across their territory. It was the largest fleet in their 300-year history. It was not going to be enough. "Sir," reported Fleet Captain Dorman, "long-range sensors are detecting the human fleet. They'll be here in 6 hours." "How many ships?" "Sir, our computers are having difficulty with an accurate count. At least 1,500 vessels, possibly more. Some of them are larger than anything in our database." Veltar closed his eyes. In the 3 days since Admiral Chen's ultimatum, they had tried everything. Diplomatic contacts with neighboring species had been ignored. Apparently, word of the collective's research programs had spread, and no one was willing to help them. Attempts to negotiate had been rejected without discussion. Even offers of complete surrender had been refused. The humans wanted more than surrender. They wanted examples. "Sir," Communication Officer Rindal interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through." Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the view screen again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood dozens of other humans in military uniforms, all wearing expressions of cold determination. "Supreme Admiral Veltar," she said formally, This is your final opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Admiral Chen, our fleet stands ready to defend our home system. Surely we can reach some arrangement. Admiral, let me be very clear about something, Chen interrupted. This is not a negotiation. This is me giving you one last chance to save some of your people's lives. We cannot simply surrender our entire civilization. You should have thought of that before you tried to kidnap children for scientific experiments. Admiral Chen's voice was like ice. Admiral, you are about to learn what happens when a species threatens Earth's young. The transmission ended, leaving the collective fleet alone with their fear. 6 hours later, the human fleet arrived. They didn't come through hyperspace. Like civilized species, they came through the same reality-tearing portals they had used before, but this time, the portals were enormous. Ships the size of small moons emerged from holes in space that shouldn't have been possible. Supreme Admiral Veltar watched in horror as the human fleet deployed. Over 2,000 ships of various sizes, from small fighters to massive battleships that dwarfed anything the collective had ever built. But it wasn't just the numbers that terrified him. It was the formation. The human fleet wasn't arranged for conquest or occupation. It was arranged for extermination. Every ship was positioned for maximum firepower overlap. Every weapon was pointed toward the collective fleet and the planets behind them. Sir, Fleet Captain Dorman said quietly, they're not here to capture territory. They're here to destroy everything. Before Veltar could respond, the human fleet opened fire, but they didn't target the collective ships first. They targeted the orbital defense platforms around Zephyr Prime. In less than 30 seconds, defensive installations that had taken decades to build were reduced to glowing debris. The message was clear. The collective's homeworld was now defenseless. Return. Fire! Veltar ordered desperately. The collective fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, energy torpedoes, particle beams, the combined firepower of their entire military struck the human fleet. The humans barely slowed down. Their ships were armored like nothing the collective had ever seen. Weapons that should have destroyed them completely seemed to barely scratch their hulls. And their own weapons. The human weapons were terrifying in their effectiveness. Instead of elegant energy beams, they used massive kinetic projectiles, fired at incredible speeds. Instead of sophisticated plasma systems, they used simple nuclear warheads that exploded with devastating force. But most frightening of all, they used tactics that the collective couldn't understand or counter. Human ships would appear from nowhere, fire everything they had, then disappear before the collective could respond. Small human vessels would dart between the massive collective, dreadnoughts targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Larger human ships would simply ram through collective formations, their armor absorbing damage that should have destroyed them. Within the first hour, half the collective fleet was destroyed. Sir, Dorman reported, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen. Put it through. Admiral Chen appeared on screen again, but now she was standing on what was clearly a ship's bridge during active combat. Behind her, Veltar could see human officers working calmly at their stations while explosions lit up the viewports. Supreme Admiral Veltar, she said, I'm giving you one final chance. Surrender now, and we'll spare your civilian population. Admiral, you're committing genocide. No, Admiral, I'm making sure this never happens again. Chen's expression was completely calm. You see, humans have a simple rule when it comes to protecting our children. If you threaten them, we remove you. Permanently. You can't destroy an entire civilization over one incident. Admiral, this wasn't one incident. We've been monitoring your transmissions for the past 3 days. We know about your research programs. We know about the 17 species you've conquered. We know about the thousands of beings you've taken for experimentation. Veltar felt his heart sink. They had studied the humans for 3 days, but apparently the humans had been studying them too. You're not just a threat to our children, Chen continued. You're a threat to everyone's children. That makes this very simple for us. What do you want? Complete dismantling of your military capability. Complete release of all research subjects. Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories. And complete assurance that this will never happen again. And if we refuse? Admiral Chen's smile was terrifying in its coldness. Then we'll demonstrate why Earth is called a death world, Admiral. We'll show you what happens when you take the wrong species children. As if to emphasize her point, another wave of human ships emerged from space-time portals. These were even larger than the first wave, and they immediately began targeting the collective's remaining ships with weapons that defied understanding. "Sir," Dormin whispered, "our fleet is down to 30% effectiveness. We can't win." This. Supreme Admiral Veltar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him with expressions of desperation and fear. Outside, their mighty fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. "All ships," he said into his communicator, "cease fire. All ships, stand down." The relief on his bridge was immediate, but Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "Admiral, I need more than a ceasefire," she said. "I need complete surrender." "You have it," Veltar said quietly. "The Zephyrian Collective surrenders unconditionally." "Good. Prepare to be boarded. Your people will be questioned about your research programs and military capabilities. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your remaining ships." The transmission ended, leaving Veltar alone with the ruins of his civilization. As human boarding parties prepared to take control of every collective ship, Admiral Chen opened a private communication channel to her daughter. "Maya, are you and your team all right?" Staff Sergeant Maya Chen appeared on the screen, grinning despite her exhaustion. "We're fine, Mom. A little banged up, but nothing serious." "Good. Your father would never forgive me if I let something happen to you on my watch." "Mom, was all this really necessary? It was just one ship." Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. "Maya, you're 22 years old. You're barely old enough to vote, let alone serve in a combat unit. But you and your team are out here, thousands of light years from home, putting your lives on the line for humanity." "It's our job, Mom." "Yes, it is, and it's my job to make sure that anyone who threatens you understands the consequences." Admiral Chen looked out at the wreckage of the collective fleet. "The galaxy is full of species that think they can take whatever they want from whoever they want. Today, they learned that Earth's children are not available for taking." 3 months later, the former territories of the Zephyrian Collective had been completely reorganized. The 17 conquered species had been freed, and their planets returned. The thousands of research subjects had been released and provided with medical care. The Collective's military had been disbanded, their weapons destroyed, and their leaders put on trial for crimes against sentient beings. And throughout the galaxy, a message had been sent that every species understood perfectly. Earth's children were under the protection of a civilization that would burn down the stars before allowing harm to come to them. Maya Chen, now promoted to lieutenant and assigned to training new recruits, often thought about that message as she watched the next generation of Earth's defenders prepare for their missions. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of threats and unknowns, but Earth's children would be ready for whatever came next, because that's what humans did. They protected their young, no matter what the cost. The massive ships appeared over Earth on a Tuesday morning in 2157. They came without warning, floating silently above major cities like crystal cathedrals in the sky. The ships were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, all smooth curves and gleaming surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. Sarah Chen was drinking coffee in her laboratory at MIT when the news broke. As one of Earth's leading quantum physicists, she had spent her career studying the mysteries of energy and matter, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. She watched the news feeds with growing amazement as the alien vessels hung motionless in the air, defying everything humans thought they knew about physics. The ships belonged to something called the Valdari Confederation. That much became clear when they began broadcasting messages in perfect English, Chinese, Spanish, and dozens of other human languages. The beings inside the ships called themselves the Valdari, and they claimed to be friends. Commander Zeth Ka was the first alien most humans ever saw. He appeared on every television screen and computer monitor on Earth at exactly noon, Greenwich Mean Time. The Valdari looked like living crystal sculptures, tall, elegant beings made of what seemed to be translucent blue stone. When Zeth Ka spoke, his voice was calm and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "People of Earth," he said, his crystalline face showing what might have been a smile. "We come to you as we have come to many worlds before yours. We bring gifts of knowledge and technology that will lift your species from the struggles of your current existence. We offer you a place among the civilized worlds of the galaxy." The message was simple and appealing. The Valdari had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, finding primitive species and helping them advance. They had done this 847 times before, always with great success. Each species they helped became part of their vast confederation, enjoying peace, prosperity, and freedom from want. World leaders were suspicious at first, as world leaders tend to be. They held emergency meetings and formed committees. They asked difficult questions about the aliens' true intentions, but the Valdari were patient. They had done this many times before, and they knew how it worked. For 3 months, the crystal. Ships waited in Earth's skies while humans debated. During this time, the Valdari shared small gifts, cures for cancer and other diseases, clean water for drought-stricken regions, and food for the hungry. They asked for nothing in return except the chance to talk. Dr. Sarah Chen was part of the scientific committee chosen to examine the alien technology. The first time she saw a Valdari quantum fusion reactor, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The device was no bigger than a refrigerator, but it could power an entire city. The mathematical principles behind it were elegant and beautiful, like a perfect symphony written in numbers. "How does it work?" she asked Commander Zeth Ka during one of their meetings. The aliens' crystalline features shifted in what she had learned was their version of amusement. "That is not important for you to know, Dr. Chen. What matters is that it works safely and efficiently. Your people need only learn to operate it, not to understand its deeper mysteries." But Sarah was a scientist, and scientists ask questions. She spent weeks studying the reactor, taking measurements and running tests. The more she learned, the more curious she became. The technology was advanced, yes, but it followed rules she could understand. The Valdari weren't using magic. They were using science that was just a few steps ahead of where humans were now. After 6 months of negotiations, Earth's governments finally agreed to accept the Valdari gift. The ceremony was held at the United Nations building in New York. Commander Zeth Ka stood before representatives of every nation on Earth and formally welcomed humanity into the Valdari Confederation. The gifts were impressive. Quantum fusion, reactors that could provide clean energy forever, anti-gravity devices that made space travel as easy as driving a car, medical technology that could cure diseases and extend human life by decades, communication systems that could send messages across the galaxy in minutes. But as Sarah Chen examined the new technology more closely, she began to notice things that bothered her. The reactors had built-in limits that prevented them from producing more than a certain amount of power. The anti-gravity systems shut down if they detected anything that might be used as a weapon. The medical devices could heal injuries and cure diseases, but they would not enhance human abilities beyond normal ranges. When she asked about these limitations, Commander Zeth Ka explained that they were safety features. "Your species is young," he said kindly. "These restrictions protect you from dangerous mistakes. As you mature and prove your wisdom, perhaps some limitations can be removed." Most humans were satisfied with this explanation. The technology was still amazing, and it solved many of Earth's problems. Cities began converting to quantum fusion power. Hospitals used Valdari medical devices to save lives every day. The first human ships left Earth's solar system using alien anti-gravity drives. But Sarah Chen was not satisfied. She had always been the type of person who took things apart to see how they worked. As a child, she had dismantled every electronic device in her house, much to her parents' frustration. Now, faced with the most advanced technology humanity had ever seen, she felt the same irresistible urge to understand. Working in secret, she began to study the quantum fusion reactor in her laboratory. She took detailed scans and ran computer simulations. She mapped every component and traced every energy flow. What she discovered made her excited and troubled at the same time. The Valdari technology was not as advanced as it seemed. The principles were actually quite simple once you understood them. The aliens had refined these principles over thousands of years, making their devices incredibly efficient and reliable. But the core science was something humans could grasp and improve upon. More importantly, Sarah realized that the safety limitations were not really about safety at all. They were about control. The reactors could produce much more power than they were allowed to. The anti-gravity systems could do far more than simple transportation. The medical devices could enhance human abilities in ways that would amaze the galaxy. Sarah began to reach out to other scientists around the world. She found engineers in Brazil who had noticed the same limitations in their anti-gravity systems. She connected with doctors in India who suspected the medical devices were being deliberately restricted. Slowly, carefully, a network of curious humans began to form. Commander Zeth Ka filed his reports with the Valdari homeworlds. Everything was proceeding normally. The humans were accepting their gifts gratefully and beginning to integrate into the Confederation's economic system. Soon, they would be producing raw materials and simple goods for other Confederation worlds, just like every other client species. The Valdari had uplifted 847 species before humans. Each time, the process had been the same. The primitives accepted. The gifts became dependent on Valdari technology and settled into their assigned role in the greater civilization. They became peaceful, productive, and, most importantly, predictable. But Commander Zeth Ka had never encountered a species quite like humans before. He had never met people who looked at a gift and immediately wondered how to make it better. He had never dealt with beings who saw limitations as challenges to overcome, rather than wise restrictions to accept. As Earth's first year as a Confederation member came to an end, Sarah Chen sat in her laboratory late one night, staring at the quantum fusion reactor she had been studying. She had finally figured out how to bypass its power limitations. With a few simple modifications, she could make it produce 10 times more energy than the Valdari version. The question was, what should she do with this knowledge? Outside her window, the lights of Boston twinkled in the darkness, powered by Valdari, technology that could do so much more than anyone realized. Somewhere above, the alien ships still hung in Earth's skies, watching and waiting for humanity to settle into its new role. But Sarah Chen had never been good at settling for anything less than the truth. And the truth was that the Valdari had underestimated what it meant to give gifts to human beings. Sarah Chen had always believed that knowledge was meant to be shared. 3 months after her breakthrough with the quantum fusion reactor, she sent encrypted messages to 12 scientists around the world. The message was simple: we need to talk. They met in secret in an abandoned warehouse outside Detroit. Sarah had chosen the location carefully, far from any Valdari monitoring stations and in a city that had been largely forgotten by the world's media. The group that gathered included some of the brightest minds on Earth. There was Marcus Rodriguez, a former Special Forces engineer who now worked on anti-gravity systems in Mexico City. Dr. Priya Sharma, a geneticist from Mumbai who had been studying the Valdari medical technology. Professor Liu Wei from Beijing, an expert in quantum mathematics. Dr. Amara Okafor from Lagos, who understood energy systems better than almost anyone alive. What I'm about to show you, Sarah said, standing before a modified Valdari reactor she had transported in secret, will change everything. She activated the device. The reactor hummed to life, its crystalline components glowing with soft blue light. But the energy readings on her instruments showed something impossible. The reactor was producing 12 times more power than it should have been able to generate. How? Whispered Professor Liu, staring at the readings in disbelief. The Valdari built limiters into every piece of technology they gave us, Sarah explained. These aren't safety features. They're control mechanisms. This reactor could have been doing this from day one, but they programmed it not to. Marcus Rodriguez stepped forward, his weathered face grim. I've seen the same thing in the anti-gravity systems. They could lift massive weights, accelerate to incredible speeds, even generate defensive fields, but they're locked down to basic, transportation only. Dr. Sharma nodded slowly. The medical devices could do far more than heal injuries and cure diseases. I've run tests. They could enhance human strength, speed, intelligence, even extend life far beyond what they're currently programmed to do. For the next 6 hours, the group shared their discoveries. Each scientist had found evidence of the same pattern. The Valdari technology was incredibly advanced, but it was being deliberately limited. What they had thought was generous alien. Assistance was actually a form of technological slavery. Why would they do this? Asked Dr. Okafor. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the Valdari Confederation's 847 member species. Look at the pattern, she said. Every species they've uplifted follows the same trajectory. First, they accept the gifts gratefully. Then they become dependent on Valdari technology. Within a generation or two, they stop innovating on their own. They become consumers and producers in the Valdari economic system, but they never advance beyond the level the Valdari allow them to reach. It's brilliant, in a twisted way, Marcus said, his military mind grasping the strategy immediately. They create willing subjects, not conquered enemies. These species think they're partners, but they're actually just, what would you call them? Clients, Professor Liu said quietly. Permanent clients who can never become competitors. The meeting lasted 3 days. By the end, they had formed what they called the Human Development Project. Their goal was simple, but dangerous: to unlock the true potential of Valdari technology and use it to advance humanity beyond what their alien benefactors had planned. The work had to be done in absolute secrecy. The Valdari monitored all official research facilities, but they seemed to overlook smaller private operations. Sarah and her team established hidden laboratories in remote locations around the world, an abandoned mine in Chile, a defunct oil platform in the North Sea, a forgotten research station in Antarctica. Dr. Sharma made the first major breakthrough 6 months later. Working in a converted submarine base off the coast of Norway, she successfully modified a Valdari medical device to enhance human physical capabilities. Her test subject was herself. She increased her muscle density by 30% and enhanced her neural processing speed by nearly 50%. I can think faster, she reported to the group during their next encrypted conference call. I can see connections I never noticed before. The enhancement doesn't just make me stronger, it makes me smarter. Marcus achieved his breakthrough a month later. He modified an anti-gravity system to not just lift objects, but to accelerate them at incredible speeds. More importantly, he figured out how to weaponize the technology. His modified systems could generate force fields strong enough to stop bullets or create focused gravity wells that could crush almost anything. The Valdari have been using watered-down versions of their own military technology, he reported. They gave us civilian-grade anti-gravity when they have systems that could level mountains. Professor Liu's discovery was perhaps the most significant. Working with quantum mathematics, he found a way to miniaturize the fusion reactors while increasing their power output. His prototype was no bigger than a briefcase, but could power a small city for a year. "We could put these in individual spacecraft," he explained during one of their meetings. "Every human ship could have power systems that match or exceed anything." In the Valdari fleet, as news of their successes spread through the hidden network, more scientists joined the project. Engineers in Brazil created improved spaceship designs. Physicists in Japan developed better communication systems. Computer scientists in South Africa built artificial intelligence programs that could analyze Valdari technology faster than any human. But the most important discovery came from Dr. Okafor in Lagos. She had been studying the basic principles underlying all Valdari technology, looking for common patterns. What she found changed everything. "They're not innovators," she announced, during a secure video conference that connected laboratories on 6 continents. "The Valdari haven't created anything new in thousands of years. They're just using the same basic principles over and over again, with minor improvements." She displayed a complex mathematical model showing the technological progression of the Valdari Confederation. "Look at this pattern. Their advancement has been linear and predictable for millennia. They've forgotten how to think creatively. They've become so focused on control and stability that they've lost the ability to innovate." Sarah stared at the data, feeling a chill run down her spine. "You're saying they've trapped themselves in the same system they use to control other species?" "Exactly. The Valdari may be technologically advanced, but they're creatively stagnant, and that gives us an advantage they don't expect." While the Human Development Project worked in secret, the official world continued to celebrate humanity's membership in the Valdari Confederation. Earth's governments reported steady progress in adopting alien technology. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were arranged. Commander Zeth Ka filed regular reports confirming that the integration was proceeding normally. But in hidden laboratories around the world, human scientists were quietly surpassing their supposed benefactors. They enhanced themselves with modified medical technology. They built spacecraft powered by improved reactors. They created weapons and defenses that the Valdari had never imagined. Captain Elena Vasquez became the first enhanced human to travel beyond Earth's solar system. Her ship, disguised as a simple cargo vessel, was actually powered by Professor Liu's miniaturized reactors and equipped with Marcus's weaponized anti-gravity systems. Her enhanced reflexes and intelligence, courtesy of Dr. Sharma's medical modifications, made her capable of piloting the vessel at speeds that would have killed an unenhanced human. Her mission was reconnaissance, to visit other Valdari client worlds and see how the Confederation really operated. What she found confirmed their worst fears. The client species were essentially slaves, though most of them didn't realize it. They had comfortable lives and advanced technology, but they had no real freedom to grow or explore. Their economies existed solely to serve Valdari interests. Their cultures had stagnated at whatever level the Valdari found acceptable. Worst of all, many of these species had forgotten their own history. They no longer remembered what they had been like before. The Valdari arrived. Generations of technological dependence had erased their ability to innovate or even imagine independence. Captain Vasquez returned to Earth with detailed intelligence about 12 different client worlds. Her reports painted a picture of a galaxy-wide system of benevolent oppression. The Valdari weren't evil in the traditional sense. They genuinely believed they were helping primitive species. But their help came with a price that most species didn't realize they were paying until it was too late. The Human Development Project faced a difficult decision. They could continue their secret research and slowly build up humanity's capabilities. Or they could take a more dramatic step and reveal what they had learned to the world. Sarah Chen stood in her laboratory, looking at the wall of modified Valdari technology they had created. fusion reactors that could power starships, anti-gravity systems that could move mountains, medical devices that could transform humans into something greater than they had ever been. In her hand, she held a communication device that could send a message to every hidden laboratory on Earth. The message would trigger the next. The message Sarah sent was simple. Phoenix Protocol is active. Begin Phase 2. Around the world, scientists who had been working in secret for 2 years received the signal. In hidden laboratories from the Arctic to Antarctica, humans began the most dangerous experiment in their species' history. They were about to find out what happened when you said no to the Valdari Confederation. Dr. Priya Sharma was the first to volunteer for full enhancement. In her laboratory beneath the streets of Mumbai, she lay on a modified medical bed while machines rebuilt her body at the cellular level. The process took 18 hours and nearly killed her twice, but when it was finished, she was no longer entirely human. Her bones were 3 times stronger than before. Her muscles could generate 4 times normal strength. Her brain processed information at speeds that made computers seem slow. Most importantly, her lifespan had been extended from decades to centuries. "I can see so clearly now," she told Sarah during their encrypted conference call. "Not just physically, mentally. I understand the Valdari technology in ways I never could before, and I can see how to improve it." Within weeks, enhanced humans were working in every hidden laboratory. The improvements they made to Valdari technology were staggering. Fusion reactors that could power entire continents, anti-gravity systems that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, communication devices that could send messages across the galaxy instantly. But the most important work was happening in orbit around Earth, where Captain Elena Vasquez was overseeing the construction of humanity's first true starship. The ship they built was unlike anything the Valdari had ever seen. It was constructed using principles learned from their technology, but improved beyond their imagination. Where Valdari ships were elegant and beautiful, the human ship was practical and powerful. Where alien vessels prioritized comfort and efficiency, the human design focused on speed and strength. They called it the Defiance. The Defiance was 1/4 mile long and bristled with weapons that shouldn't have existed. Its hull was made from materials that were stronger than Valdari crystal, but flexible enough to absorb massive impacts. Its engines could accelerate the ship to speeds that would tear apart conventional vessels. Most importantly, it was crewed entirely by enhanced humans who could survive forces that would kill ordinary people. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at Earth through windows that could withstand the pressure of a star's core. Behind her, her crew of enhanced humans worked at control stations that responded to thought as much as touch. Every person on the ship was stronger, faster, and smarter than any human in history. "Ma'am," reported her navigation officer, Lieutenant Chen. No relation to Sarah, despite the name. "We're ready for the first test flight." The Defiance slipped away from Earth on a Tuesday morning, just as the Valdari ships had arrived 4 years earlier. But where the alien vessels had announced their presence with fanfare, the human ship left in complete silence. Its stealth systems, developed from principles hidden in Valdari communication technology, made it invisible to every sensor the aliens possessed. The ship's destination was a Valdari monitoring station in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The station's purpose was to watch for any unusual activity in Earth's solar system. Its crew of 12 Valdari had been filing routine reports for years, noting humanity's steady progress in accepting their assigned role in the Confederation. The Defiance approached the station at a speed that should have been impossible. When it finally appeared on Valdari sensors, it was too late for the aliens to react. The human ship's weapons disabled the station's defenses in seconds, and boarding parties of enhanced humans cut through the station's hull like it was paper. The Valdari crew surrendered without a fight. They had never encountered resistance from a client species before, and they didn't know how to respond. Captain Vasquez walked onto their command deck wearing armor that made her look like a warrior from humanity's future. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the Human Defense Force," she announced, her enhanced voice carrying clearly through the station's thin atmosphere. "You are now prisoners of war." The Valdari commander, a being called Yeth Ko, stared at her in confusion. "This is impossible," he said, his crystal features shifting through patterns that indicated shock and disbelief. "Client species do not have military forces. You are not authorized to possess weapons of this capability." "We're not your clients anymore," Captain Vasquez replied calmly, "and we don't need your authorization for anything." While the Defiance was capturing its first Valdari prisoners, enhanced humans on Earth were beginning the next phase of their plan. They had spent months identifying every Valdari monitoring station, communication relay, and administrative facility on the planet. Now they moved against all of them simultaneously. The aliens never saw it coming. To them, humans were still the grateful primitives who had accepted their gifts 4 years earlier. The idea that these same humans could develop advanced military capabilities was beyond their comprehension. Enhanced human soldiers, moving with superhuman speed and strength, overwhelmed Valdari positions in minutes. Anti-gravity weapons that could create localized gravity fields trapped alien personnel without harming them. Advanced communication jammers, developed from Valdari technology, cut off all contact between Earth and the Confederation's home worlds. Commander Zeth Ka was in his office in New York when enhanced humans broke down his door. He had been writing a report about humanity's continued progress when armed figures in advanced armor surrounded his desk. "Commander Zeth Ka," said the squad leader, her enhanced vocal cords giving her words an otherworldly quality. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to enslave a sentient species." The Valdari commander looked at the humans surrounding him, his crystalline features struggling to process what was happening. This is not possible. You are violating Confederation law. You are attacking your benefactors." "Your benefactors?" The squad leader removed her helmet, revealing the face of Dr. Priya Sharma. Her enhanced features looked human, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of intelligence beyond normal human limits. "Is that what you call yourselves? Because we've learned what you really are." Within 6 hours, every Valdari on Earth was in human custody. Not a single alien had been seriously harmed, but all of them were prisoners. The swift operation had been planned and executed with precision that amazed even the humans who carried it out. But the real shock came when Captain Vasquez returned from the asteroid belt with intelligence data stolen from the monitoring station. The information she brought back revealed the true scope of the Valdari operation and confirmed humanity's worst fears. Sarah Chen stood in the command center they had built beneath the Rocky Mountains, studying holographic displays that showed the Valdari Confederation structure. 847 client species, spread across thousands of worlds, trillions of sentient beings who had been trapped in the same system that the Valdari had tried to impose on humanity. "Look at this," she said, pointing to economic data stolen from Valdari computers. "Every client species follows the same pattern. They provide raw materials and simple manufactured goods to the Confederation. In return, they receive limited technology and the promise of protection." Marcus Rodriguez, now enhanced like the others, studied the military data. "Their protection is a joke," he reported. "The Valdari haven't fought a real war in thousands of years. Their entire military is designed to intimidate primitive species, not to face actual resistance." Dr. Sharma pulled up biological data about the client species. Most of them have been genetically modified to be less aggressive and more compliant. The Valdari have been breeding the fight out of them for generations. The picture that emerged was of a galactic civilization built on systematic oppression. The Valdari weren't evil conquerors, they were paternalistic overlords who genuinely believed they were helping primitive species by controlling them. But the result was the same, a galaxy full of slaves who didn't know they were slaves. "We have to tell them," Sarah said finally. All of them. Every client species needs to know what's been done to them. It was Captain Vasquez who came up with the plan that would change everything. The Valdari communication network connected every world in the Confederation. If they could access it, they could send a message to every client species simultaneously. We'll need to modify the Defiance for a long-range mission, she explained. The main communication hub is in the Valdari home system, 300 light-years from here. But if we can reach it and tap into their network, we can broadcast to the entire galaxy. The mission would be incredibly dangerous. The Valdari home system was the most heavily defended location in the Confederation. No client species had ever been allowed to visit it. If the Defiance was detected, it would face the full power of the Valdari military. But the enhanced humans had advantages their enemies didn't expect. They could think faster, react quicker, and endure stresses that would kill ordinary beings. Their technology, built on Valdari principles, but improved beyond recognition, was superior to anything the Confederation possessed. The Valdari response fleet arrived at Earth 6 months after the Defiance had disappeared into deep space. 50 of the Confederation's finest warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their crystal hulls gleaming with barely contained energy. Admiral Keth Ra commanded the fleet from the massive dreadnought Eternal Harmony. She had been chosen for this mission because she had experience dealing with client species that became difficult. In her 3,000 years of service, she had put down 17 minor rebellions and corrected dozens of administrative problems, but she had never faced anything like what was waiting for her in Earth's solar system. "Admiral," reported her sensor officer, "I'm detecting massive artificial structures throughout the system. They appear to be defensive platforms?" Admiral Keth Ra studied the tactical display with growing concern. The humans had built something in the months since losing contact with their Valdari overseers. Massive space stations orbited every major planet, bristling with weapons that shouldn't exist. The asteroid belt had been turned into a fortress, with thousands of automated defense platforms protecting approach routes to the inner system. "How is this possible?" she asked her tactical officer. "Client species do not possess military technology. These readings must be in error." But the readings were not in error. While the Defiance had been traveling toward the Valdari homeworlds, the enhanced humans on Earth had been preparing for exactly this moment. They had used their improved technology to build defenses that would make even the Valdari fleet think twice about attacking. The first warning came when Admiral Keth Ra's ships tried to approach Mars. A beam of coherent gravity struck the lead cruiser, crushing its forward sections like paper. The ship survived, but barely. The message was clear. "Come no closer." "This is Admiral Keth Ra of the Valdari Confederation," she broadcast on all frequencies. "The human species has violated Confederation law and attacked Confederation personnel. Surrender immediately and submit to correction or face the consequences." The reply came from a figure that appeared on her main screen. It was Dr. Sarah Chen, but she looked different than she had 4 years earlier. Her features had been enhanced, and her eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost alien. Behind her, Admiral Keth Ra could see a command center filled with technology that rivaled anything in the Confederation fleet. "Admiral Keth Ra," Sarah said calmly. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking for the Human Defense Force. We reject your authority and demand that you leave our system immediately." The Valdari Admiral felt something she had never experienced before. Genuine surprise. In 3,000 years of service, no client species had ever spoken to her with such confidence. "You are making a grave mistake," Admiral Keth Ra replied. "The Confederation has the power to destroy your world. Submit now, and we will show mercy." Sarah's enhanced features showed what might have been amusement. "Admiral, I don't think you understand the situation. We're not the same species you left here 6 months ago. We've learned to use the gifts you gave us. All of them." What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Battle of Sol. It lasted 4 hours and changed the balance of power in the Confederation forever. The Valdari fleet advanced into the solar system with confidence born of millennia of unchallenged supremacy. Their ships were beautiful works of art, designed to inspire awe in primitive species. Their weapons were powerful enough to crack planets. Their shields could deflect any attack they had ever encountered. But they had never encountered weapons built by enhanced humans using improved Valdari technology. The first human attack came from the asteroid belt. Thousands of small fighters, each piloted by an enhanced human, swarmed toward the Valdari fleet. The fighters were tiny compared to the alien dreadnoughts, but they moved with impossible speed and agility. Their weapons fired beams of focused gravity that could punch through any armor. Admiral Keth Ra watched in growing horror as her beautiful ships were torn apart by opponents she could barely track. The human fighters moved like living things, dodging her weapons with ease and striking at her fleet's weak points with surgical precision. "Impossible!" she whispered, as one of her cruisers broke apart under concentrated gravity beam fire. "No client species possesses this capability." The worst shock came when the human capital ships revealed themselves. They had been hidden among the larger asteroids, masked by stealth systems that made them invisible to Valdari sensors. When they finally attacked, they demonstrated capabilities that no Confederation admiral had imagined possible. The flagship of the human fleet was a massive vessel that dwarfed even Admiral Keth Ra's dreadnought. It was ugly by Valdari standards, all sharp angles and brutal efficiency, but when it opened fire, its weapons carved through Confederation shields like they weren't there. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, his crystalline features flickering. "With panic patterns, that ship is generating gravitational fields strong enough to warp space-time. Its weapons are using our own technology, but improved beyond our specifications. The battle was a massacre." The Valdari fleet, designed to intimidate rather than fight, could not match the brutal effectiveness of human military engineering. Within 2 hours, 30 of Admiral Keth Ra's ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors were trapped in a gravity well generated by human weapons, unable to escape or effectively fight back. But the humans did something that shocked the Valdari even more than their military victory. Instead of destroying the remaining ships, they offered terms. Sarah. Chen appeared on Admiral Keth Ra's screen again, this time speaking from the bridge of the human flagship. Behind her, enhanced humans worked at control stations that processed information faster than Valdari minds could follow. "Admiral," Sarah said, "your fleet is defeated. But we're not going to destroy your remaining ships. Instead, we're going to give you a choice." Admiral Keth Ra stared at the human with confusion that bordered on shock. "A choice? You can return to your home worlds and report what happened here. Tell your people that humanity rejects client species status and claims independence, or you can stay and learn what we've discovered about Confederation technology." "I don't understand." Sarah's enhanced features showed something that might have been pity. "Admiral, your people have been stagnant for thousands of years. You've been so focused on controlling other species that you've forgotten how to grow yourselves. We can show you what your own technology is really capable of." The demonstration that followed changed Admiral Keth Ra's understanding of everything she thought she knew about technology and warfare. The humans showed her weapons and defenses that used Valdari principles but achieved effects her people had never imagined. They revealed modifications to Confederation technology that increased efficiency by orders of magnitude. Most shocking of all, they freely shared the knowledge. "Here," Sarah said, transmitting technical specifications directly to Admiral Keth Ra's ship. "These are the improvements we've made to your fusion reactor design. Your engineers can verify the mathematics. This isn't magic. It's just better engineering." Admiral Keth Ra studied the data with growing amazement. The human modifications were elegant and logical. Her own engineers confirmed that the improvements would work exactly as claimed, but she couldn't understand why the humans were sharing such valuable information. "Why are you telling us this?" she asked. "Because knowledge should be free," Sarah replied. "Your confederation is built on the idea that some species deserve to know more than others. We reject that idea completely." The implications were staggering. If the humans were willing to share their technological improvements freely, then every species in the galaxy could benefit. The rigid hierarchy that kept client species dependent on Valdari technology would collapse overnight. "This would destroy the Confederation," Admiral Keithraw said quietly. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It would, and something better would take its place." While this conversation was taking place in Earth's solar system, the Defiance was approaching the Valdari homeworlds 300 light-years away. Captain Vasquez and her enhanced crew had made the journey in record time, pushing their improved engines beyond what any Valdari ship could match. The Valdari home system was a fortress. Massive, orbital platforms surrounded every planet. Automated defense networks monitored every approach route. The Confederation's most powerful warships patrolled the outer system, ready to destroy any unauthorized vessel. But the Defiance had been designed by enhanced humans who understood Valdari weaknesses better than the Valdari understood them themselves. The ship slipped through the outer defenses like a ghost, its stealth systems making it invisible to every sensor the Confederation possessed. Captain Vasquez stood on her bridge, watching the Valdari homeworld grow larger on her screens. The planet was beautiful, a world of crystal cities and artificial gardens that had been perfected over millennia. It was also the communication hub for the entire Confederation, the central point through which every message in the galaxy was routed. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "I've tapped into their primary network. We have access to every client world in the Confederation." 5 years after the human transmission reached every corner of the galaxy, the Valdari Confederation existed only in history books. The revolution that began on Earth had spread to every client world, and the old order had crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. Dr. Sarah Chen, now bearing the enhanced features that marked her as one of the first generation of improved humans, stood in the observation deck of Unity Station. The massive space station orbited Earth at the center of what had once been humanity's solar system defenses. Now it served as the headquarters for something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly voluntary alliance of free species. Through the vast windows, Sarah could see ships from dozens of worlds. Thrak warships with their distinctive spiked hulls flew alongside elegant Zephyrian research vessels. Former Valdari client species that had rediscovered their warrior heritage shared space with peaceful traders from worlds that had chosen scientific advancement over military might. "The Galactic Liberation Council meeting is ready to begin," announced Lieutenant Chen, Sarah's aide and one of the newest generation of enhanced humans. Unlike Sarah, who had been modified after reaching adulthood, Lieutenant Chen had been born with enhancements. She represented the future of humanity, beings who were still recognizably human but possessed capabilities their ancestors could never have imagined. Sarah made her way to the council chamber, a vast hall that could accommodate representatives from species with wildly different physical requirements. The chamber was filled with beings that 5 years ago had been docile clients of the Valdari Confederation. Now they were free peoples, and the change was remarkable. General Thrak Zar of the Thrak warrior clans stood nearly 8 feet tall, his natural armor polished to a mirror shine. His people had been one of the first to respond to humanity's transmission, and they had embraced their rediscovered martial heritage with enthusiasm. But unlike the old days when the Thrak had been conquerors, they now used their strength to protect weaker species from the chaos that followed the Confederation's collapse. "The Sector 7 situation has been resolved," General Thrak Zar reported, his deep voice carrying easily across the chamber. "The Valdari loyalist forces have surrendered. The client species in that region are now free to choose their own paths." Not all former Confederation worlds had embraced freedom immediately. Some Valdari administrators had tried to maintain control through force, and some client species had been so conditioned to dependency that they feared independence. But the alliance of free worlds had been patient, offering help rather than conquest. Dr. Zeph On of the Zephyrian Science Collective presented the next report. Her people had been researchers before the Valdari arrived, and they had returned to their scientific roots with remarkable results. The technological sharing program continues to exceed all projections, she announced, her translucent features glowing with excitement. Integration of human improvements with traditional Zephyrian research methods has produced 17 major breakthroughs this quarter alone. The technological revolution that followed the Confederation's collapse had been extraordinary. Species that had been limited to predetermined roles suddenly had access to the combined knowledge of hundreds of worlds. The humans had kept their promise to share everything freely, and the results had exceeded everyone's wildest dreams. Captain Elena Vasquez, now an admiral commanding humanity's exploration fleets, provided the most exciting news of all. We've made contact with 3 more free species beyond the former Confederation borders, she reported. They've been hiding from Valdari expansion for centuries, maintaining their independence in isolated systems. They're eager to join our alliance. The discovery that not all advanced species had fallen under Valdari control had been one of the most encouraging developments of the post-Confederation era. These hidden civilizations brought new perspectives and technologies that enriched their growing alliance even further. But the most significant report came from an unexpected source. Commander Zeth Ka, the former Valdari administrator who had first welcomed humanity into the Confederation, stepped forward to address the council. The years had changed him. No longer the confident overlord who had offered gifts to primitive humans, Zeth Ka now served as an advocate for Valdari refugees. Most of his people had struggled to adapt to a galaxy where they were no longer the supreme authority, but some had embraced the new reality with surprising enthusiasm. The Valdari integration program has reached a milestone, he announced, his crystalline features displaying patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. 1,000 former Confederation administrators have completed retraining and are now serving as equals in Alliance institutions. It had been Sarah's idea to offer former Valdari the chance to join the new galactic community as equals rather than rulers. Many had rejected the offer, unable to imagine themselves as anything other than superior beings. But others had discovered something they had lost over thousands of years of unopposed authority, the joy of learning from others. I have a personal announcement as well, Zeth Ka continued. I have been accepted into the advanced physics program at Zephyrian Science Collective. At my age, it seems I am still capable of learning new things. The chamber erupted in applause from hundreds of different species. The sight of a former Valdari overlord preparing to become a student had powerful symbolic value for the entire alliance. But the most important presentation of the day came from an unexpected source. Dr. Priya Sharma, now enhanced beyond even Sarah's capabilities, stepped forward with data that would reshape their understanding of galactic history. We have discovered the truth about the Valdari, she announced, her enhanced voice carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber. They were not the original architects of the Confederation system. They were its victims. The holographic display showed ancient star charts and historical records recovered from the deepest Valdari archives. The story they told was both tragic and illuminating. 12,000 years ago, the Valdari were contacted by an even older civilization, the Architects. The Architects used the same system the Valdari later adopted, gifts of technology that came with hidden limitations. The Valdari became clients just like the species they would later control. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Valdari had not been evil conquerors. They had been prisoners of a system they had inherited and never questioned. What happened to the Architects? asked General Thraxar. They stagnated, Dr. Sharma replied. Just as the Valdari did. The system they created was so effective at maintaining control that it eventually controlled them too. They became so focused on stability that they lost the ability to innovate. When their technology finally failed after millions of years, they simply faded away. Commander Zethkar stepped forward, his features displaying patterns of deep sadness. We found records of their final transmission. The architects realized what they had done, not just to their clients, but to themselves. They had created a galaxy-wide prison and locked themselves inside it. The revelation put the Valdari in an entirely new light. They had not been malicious oppressors, but tragic figures trapped in a cycle they had inherited and never understood. Their gifts had been genuine attempts to help, corrupted by a system that turned generosity into control. This is why our alliance is so important, Sarah said, addressing the council. We have broken a cycle that has controlled galactic civilization for millions of years. For the first time since the architects, we have a truly free galaxy. The meeting concluded with reports from across the Alliance. Former client worlds were flourishing in ways they had never imagined possible. Species that had been enemies were working together on projects that benefited everyone. Knowledge flowed freely between worlds, creating innovations that surpassed anything the Confederation had achieved. But perhaps the most important development was happening on Earth itself. In laboratories around humanity's home world, Enhanced, human scientists worked alongside researchers from dozens of species. They were not trying to control or dominate. They were simply exploring the universe together, sharing their discoveries freely with anyone who wanted to learn. Dr. Sarah Chen returned to her laboratory that evening, walking through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Her own research team included a Thrak engineer, a Zephyrian physicist, 2 former Valdari administrators, and 3 enhanced humans from the newest generation. On her desk lay reports from exploration missions that were pushing into regions of the galaxy that had never been explored. The Alliance was growing, not through conquest, but through the simple appeal of freedom and shared knowledge. Lieutenant Chen approached with the day's final report. Ma'am, we've received a transmission from the Deep Explorer mission. They've found something remarkable. The report described an ancient space station orbiting a dead star in the galaxy's outer rim. The station was millions of years old and appeared to contain records from a civilization that predated even the architects. Initial scans suggested it held technologies and knowledge beyond anything currently known. They're requesting permission to investigate, Lieutenant Chen continued. The full analysis could take decades.